because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. It is our weekend edition, and we have a little bit different roundtable, but I'm excited about that. First of all, one of the people that does join us on a fairly regular basis on the roundtable is Debbie Georgatos, talk show host and author. And Debbie, always great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me. Love being here.
And this is a good show prep for you because you have your Sunday program.
I say that every week. So show prep on Friday,
so people can listen to you again on Sunday if they would like to do so. But let me go around the round table. Ladies first, Star Parker has been with us by phone usually, but is in studio with us today. She is the founder and president of CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. We've posted information about her and one of her commentaries, Why Ben Carson is Flying High. And Star, just great to have you in studio with us.
I'm excited to be in studio with you, especially to see the wall of celebrities. Everyone on your wall, I know them. I mean, amazing people.
We'll put you up there, too. By the way, we videotaped her ahead of time, so you're going to be able next week when we do our Truth 360 to see that video as well. And I just might mention, since we have such a great group of individuals in here, don't forget you can not only listen to the program, but you can watch the program. If you click on that button that says watch, you can see what goes on in the studio. And somebody who we've had very often on this program, perhaps more than anybody around the table, but I think one of the first times we've had you in a while on our weekend edition, Dr. Merrill Matthews. He's a resident scholar with the Institute for Policy Innovation. And Dr. Matthews, always great to have you on the program.
Good to be back in the seat.
I might mention that we have some material from the Institute for Policy Innovation on Donald Trump, and so we'll get into some of that as well. But let's get into the debate. First of all, the RNC, the Republican National Committee, has decided to pull out of the NBC debate. Now, that's in February. By that time, it's kind of a foregone conclusion. But a lot of people, even in the media, have felt that it was rather unfair and maybe even a little bit snarky the way some of the questions were asked Wednesday. So, Debbie, let me start with you. What are your thoughts about the debate? Some people thought some of the candidates did well, but the one that was the big loser was CNBC.
I think that's exactly right. I think CNBC's, the questions, the tone, even the comebacks after several people answer were just, snarky can maybe almost a playful word, but I thought they were hostile. Yeah. I think they were just showing their agenda. I think the one good thing that might have come out of this is that so many Americans tuned in to watch that debate, and you hear people on the right complaining about media bias. And I think this is when we hear that again, I think there'd be more Americans saying, oh yeah, I remember how that debate was. It helps make the case that what people perceive as the mainstream media is actually very left-wing, very biased. I thought it was really disgraceful. I could go through a bunch of specifics, but really disgraceful.
Well, we'll get into that. Star, you've certainly been on press conferences. You've run for Congress, so you know what it's like to get some pretty hostile questions. What is your assessment of what happened Wednesday night?
Well, I'm going to agree with most that the media is biased, but I'm also going to say on this point that it allowed for those that are looking for their ideal candidate to see another side, how they handle that hostile media, because it is going to be extremely important. As Marco Rubio said, this is their super PAC on the left. So we will have to deal with it once again. And so it sharpened many candidates and others lost their voice. So it really served a dual purpose. It spotlight as you're saying, that told us don't trust the media, but it also showed us who could handle them.
Yeah, Merrill Matthews?
Well, I liked it because I think it backfired on CNBC. They thought, I believe, that by being snarky, they raised the ratings. People come away talking about it, thinking how fun it is because they poked at the Republicans, and in fact, they've been nothing but panned for that.
Yes.
And so if there's a good side to this, it's that CNBC has been really devastated in the post-debate discussion.
Yes. Well, again, now pulling out of the NBC debate in February, that's probably not going to be a big deal. I made the case, and I want to hear your comments, and you're quite free to disagree with me, that I thought this might be one of those make or break debates. Yes, there's another one coming in November 10th, and yes, there's one in December. Who's really going to be watching in December? Especially the Democratic side, but even the Republican side. So maybe you got one more on November 10th, but what about this? I mean, does that begin to say this is the end of some of the candidacies? Jeb Bush was supposed to have a comeback. I didn't see anything. What are your thoughts? Was this a make or break debate?
It certainly could have been. I thought a lot of people who have really enjoyed watching how well Carly Fiorina performed in other debates were kind of waiting to see that breakout kind of feeling, and I don't think it happened for her, even though I thought she held steady. She did a good job. She answered criticisms about her having been fired by HP, but I thought she handled herself well, but she didn't have a breakout. I think the clear winner, I thought Marco Rubio was fabulous. I love Ted Cruz's critique of the moderators right in the middle of the debate and a non-response to a question. I thought that was really strong. To Starr's point, it showed who will stand up when you're being bullied, and it was Marco, Ted, and actually surprisingly Chris Christie. He got a couple good lines in too. I thought that was really good. There's no one I think who's really low in the polls who had a breakout from it, and so I think I would love to see the field greatly reduced truly before the next debate.
That's why it was a breakout, because what happened, in my opinion, the liberals have changed the narrative. Tea Party was about anti-establishment, establishment. It was not about insider, outsider. When you think about anti-establishment candidates, you think about Ted Cruz, you think about Marco Rubio, you think about Rand Paul, and perhaps maybe even Chris Christie. But when you think about outsider candidates, you think about Trump, you think about Carson, you think about Carly. So what this debate did was showed how much experience in this is going to take. Politics is business. And when you think about where we are as a country, $4 trillion businesses that this is with an $18.5 trillion debt. We are going to need someone that understands what that means. And we saw that at the debate the other day, that the ones that perhaps have gotten a lot of spotlight lately, when you go that one level deeper, when experience matters, we begin to see other candidates step forth. Ted Cruz was just incredible. Marco Rubio, people are watching now with a different eye. And Chris Christie was pretty funny.
The fantasy football comment was very good. And I think lots of people, I'll tell you two quick things. One is I kind of put Ted in the outsider category because he hasn't been in Washington long and no one there is speaking to him. So therefore,
but he's got a long political resume and he's a constitutional attorney. He understands the process. And this is where the outsiders don't necessarily. And it does count. Experience counts.
Yeah. The other thing I'll tell you real quickly, I have a friend traveling with the Carly Fiorina campaign. I'm not particularly advocating for or against her, but a friend traveling with her who said before the debate started, all the moderators, they had turned to the audience, they said, no clapping, no talking, no yelling, had told the audience you must be silent. And even that was rebellion against the media. Yeah. It lasted about 5 minutes, and the audience said, you know what, we're going to clap, we're going to cheer.
Yeah. But what you see with this is, and both of you sort of hinted at it, you start seeing a coalescing around certain candidates, Marco Rubio, to some extent Ted Cruz. I've been a little surprised that Chris Christie has not been able to do any better than he has. He did a fairly good job in some of those answers.
That was his night, yeah.
But you also, on the coalescing around some candidates, you also get the impression that there's just sort of a growing interest. Mike Huckabee, why are you here?
Yeah.
Rand Paul, I like Rand Paul, but why are you here? You're just not breaking out at all. And so there's for 3 or 4 or 5 of them, I think there's an increasing sense of, we don't know why they're there. You're probably better off stepping out sometime soon so that people can begin to decide on others.
Yeah, trim it down from 14 to 6 was something we talked about.
But that's something they'll have to do. I mean, Scott Walker did ask for others to do it, and let's see if they're humble enough to do that.
Yeah, well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to get some specifics. First of all, one of the pieces here by Star Parker, When Ben Carson is Flying High. Now, I'll just acknowledge that you write for Creator Syndicate, and that was written on Monday. And now I know you have a slightly different view of him on Friday. So that's one. We have some stuff from the Institute for Policy Innovation. I think certainly Dr. Merrill Matthews can help us with the Donald Trump tax issue. And of course, we have a couple of others now as well from Ted Cruz. So we'll get into specifics. One of the things people are asking us to do. So we'll do that right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Tomorrow is October 31st. Most people know it as Halloween, but it also has long been known as the Festival of the Dead. The Celtic tribes and their priest, the Druids, celebrated this day as a marker for the change from life to death. November 1st was the beginning of the new year, so Halloween or Samhain was like New Year's Eve. It was both a time of death and new beginnings. The young would wander the countryside disguised in scary masks, carrying turnips carved to scary jack-o'-lanterns to frighten off ghosts and goblins. They believed that the veil between the living and the dead was believed to be the thinnest at that time, and therefore one could readily communicate with loved ones in spirit. Deuteronomy 18 warns us not to be involved in any activity that includes divination. The term Halloween is shortened from All Hallows Even, as it is the evening before All Hallows Day, also known as All Saints' Day. Pope Gregory moved the day from May 13th to November 1st. This made Halloween the eve of the celebration of November 1st and became All Hallows Mass, and October 31st became All Hallows Even. You know, today, Halloween has become one of the most celebrated holidays. We're told that people spend more on decorations at Halloween than any other holiday except Christmas. And often, the Halloween decorations have included more and more occultic activity. So I believe Christians have two options: to ignore Halloween or to provide an alternative. Many churches now provide a fall fun festival. I hope you have thought through what you will do tomorrow. Don't just go with the flow. Make an informed decision about what you will do on Halloween. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition. A little bit later, we'll open up the phones, give you a chance to join our conversation. But we do have a round table of guests that involves Debbie Georgatos as well as Star Parker and Dr. Merrill Matthews. Star, let me come to you. Of course, again, I gave the disclaimer. You wrote this on Monday. Why Ben Carson is flying high. We've posted it on our website. That also, of course, gives a link to urbancure.org so people can find all of your articles and find out more about you. But talk about that for just a minute. Ben Carson certainly has done very well, maybe actually is in the lead in Iowa. What about this?
Well, it is still relevant today, even though people looked at Ben on the debate and said, are we sure he has the experience now to run a $4 trillion business that has $18.5 trillion worth of debt? But the reason that he's flying high is because when you put him up against a Hillary Clinton and any and everything on the left, the American people are looking for honesty. They want somebody that will be honest with them, someone they can trust. And those facts are behind Ben's story, and his life's accomplishments are still there. And so he's a great alternative up to a Donald Trump who's thrown a brick against the wall. But Ben has that same passion for what has broken down in the country, but in a more gentle way does he deliver that. I think the bigger questions now are coming between a Trump, a Carly, and a Carson are not that you can point to what's wrong in the country. It's do you know enough on how to fix them?
Yeah. Well, we're talking about Ben Carson for just a minute. People the other day were trying to explain Ben Carson's health care plan. And if there's anybody that could possibly understand health care, it is Dr. Merrill Matthews, maybe Michael Burgess, one or two other people in the higher country. Can you figure this out? Because even when I saw him being interviewed, I wasn't clear about what this health care plan would be by Ben Carson.
Initially, what he had said was that he likes health savings accounts. And you and I have talked about these for years. So we like that aspect of it. What he wanted to do was to have everybody have a health savings account, every American. He was willing, he used the term populated, with $2,000 of government money. And they would have to use up to a third of that to buy a high deductible policy, which sounded like, number one, you're putting everybody in the country on the dole. So rather than having roughly 50% getting some kind of subsidy, everybody would get one. And then you're mandating that they have a health insurance policy on top of that. He goes on Chris Wallace. He changes that completely,
Yes.
and
I watched
confuses
that.
Chris.
Yeah.
Confused me because
I'm sitting here. Nobody could figure out what was going after he was on that show.
but-
well, that's not right. That's the old policy. And like, oh goodness, okay.
But his web video where he explains that was still up and live.
Oh dear.
Yes.
So it's still, if you want to go look at it, you can look at it. But what he said now, which is the right approach, is you want to use the money that's in the system. We spend about $800 billion on private health insurance in the country. You've got several $100 billion going for Medicare and Medicaid. So the question had always been, why wouldn't you use the money that's already in the system to fund this rather than $630 billion in new spending on that? But he didn't explain how that would happen. So he's got a system now where he says, I want to use the money that's out there in the system. That's good. But how are you going to draw on that money, and what's different? I mean, are you going to tell employers you all have to move to health savings accounts? Employers can move to health savings accounts right now.
Yes.
And millions of them have. But what's different between Carson's plan, if it's not going to be a mandate, and what they can do right now? So he's got a number more details he needs to put on it.
That's a good way of saying it. Any comments, Debbie?
Well, Ben Carson, I saw some polling in Iowa. Really, women, especially on the GOP primary side, are excited about him. I think they can relate to his gentle demeanor. They feel like he's a good guy. That what Starr is saying, they relate to a sense of honesty and intelligence, obvious intelligence and warmth. I have to say, I think though, as you look at the broader set of issues that face America, and in trying to choose a commander in chief, I agree with Starr wholeheartedly. We want someone trustworthy. We're tired of Washington. But I think people are concerned about what's going to happen with healthcare. They're concerned about ISIS and foreign policy, and they're concerned about immigration. And they want to, my concern about, I haven't heard yet from Dr. Carson, the kind of toughness I think some people might be looking for related to foreign policy. Do you hear that gut level? I'm going to be right there with you, America. I'm going to defend America's interests. I hope maybe he is going to get around to sounding that way, but he hasn't yet. And I think that's where people might step back.
Well, I think it's because in the sounding, to make the point again, why we must assess should an outsider run this business is that you are more dependent than on advisors to try to figure out what the details of health savings. Perhaps the change between getting on Chris Wallace was that Cato knocked on his door and said, guys, this is not exactly what we had in mind. Or NCPA, who was the author of the health savings accounts. So when you're from the outside, you're more dependent on advisors, more dependent on others to give you the type of information that you need to develop out your worldview on these issues. If you haven't been in it a long time, then you're absolutely right. Even on something like immigration, you don't have it down in your gut. Reagan was not an outsider. He was an anti-establishment candidate. And that's why we heard that line, tear this wall down. He knew it inherently.
Yes.
Right. And he chose advisors well. And that is part of what really any of the candidates on either side, at the end of the day, they can't run the whole country and every policy. They have to. So you're looking for the character and the values they have to dictate their decisions about whom they would choose to have.
Yeah,
as
but
their
how would
list of
they know who to
advisors.
choose if they don't know anyone?
And-
They're
and-
dependent
Right,
on someone else to even tell them who the good guys are that can do these different agencies and all of the intricacies
And
of Washington.
I think Debbie's right. You need that character. You need to have the instinct. But when you've been in this for a while, you realize there's a sort of a depth of knowledge when you've just been involved in it. It is very hard to move from having never done anything on foreign policy to be a foreign policy expert.
boy.
And you don't have
For
to be
sure.
a foreign policy expert, but you have to have a sort of a basis and depth of knowledge on that just to bring some background to the table. And Ben doesn't have that. Carly would have it on business, but I don't think would have it on foreign policy. And Trump has certainly been engaged in the political field for some time, but also would not have that sort of depth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the questions I wanted to ask for Starr, of course, I wanted to ask Buddy about healthcare. I wanted to ask you about Ben Carson. Welfare perpetuates poverty, buys votes. That was seen as a major gaffe. I think you'd probably agree with him on that point.
Welfare perpetuates
Poverty. Yeah.
and buys votes. I do agree with him, and that's probably why the left hates him so much, and the right has given him a second look, because when you think about his ability to tell the truth in a very soft manner, to make us focus on issues that are not necessarily popular, he's done a great job. I mean, he is the one that now is looking at abortion saying, well, now, if we were doing this same type of discussion during slavery, would we be giving them $550 million as taxpayers to continue to slaughter, the innocent. So the poverty issues, that income inequality question is one that I think has not gotten enough attention in these debates, and it's why it is very, very important that we get serious moderators so that we can get to serious and deep questions that we know the left are going to put on the table when it comes to that time. We should have a discussion about minimum wage laws, the role of unions in setting those standards so that, number one, we can address the illegal immigration problem. The reason that we have much of this is because we have labor laws in this country. But number two, it also helps us make the discussion about why so many jobs are going outside of our country. We should have discussions about personal retirement accounts in Social Security. Increasing the retirement age? Really? So we're ready to tell truck drivers that instead of driving till you're 70, now you need to be on the road till you're 75, just to recover that money that you put in when you could put it in the marketplace. So there are a lot of things that the right has thought about for long periods of time and deep thought through our think tanks. It's time to bring their information up and start marketing it to the public.
Let me mention, we do have a link to your website, again, urbancure.org, and they're going to find a lot of articles on things like unions and welfare and a variety of other issues that you've addressed. So I certainly wanted people to look to that. But Debbie, you look like you have something that you need to say before we take this next break.
I'm just going to comment that the GOP's kind of stereotypical description in the American political conversation is we don't care, we care for the rich, we don't care about the poor. It is really important to have a response, a serious response on the GOP side to the income inequality arguments which are going on the left. Of course, their solutions are always to take control of the government and redistribute wealth and tax a lot of people and give to somebody else. To have thoughtful, sensitive answers coming from the right that actually address and lead to a cure of the problem that do not involve socialist answers is vital for us to send the message to lower income Americans that the conservative side has answers better and more long-term and more healing for you than just a new government program. It's a vital thing. I was disappointed.
And we have those answers. They just won't ask. They don't ask because they don't want to give our side the opportunity to actually share the ideas that we have.
And this debate was supposed to be about economic policy.
Right.
This would have been the perfect place to talk about it.
That's why Ted Cruz said it's a wonderful thing to say, wait just a minute.
Yes. Star, I understand you have another commitment, so we appreciate you joining the roundtable for just a little bit of time. And we'll carry on without you. But again, urbancure.org. We come back, we have what Donald Trump has been talking about and some of these tax plans, and we now have one for Ted Cruz. So we'll talk about taxes and then get into entitlements, Social Security, and of course, we'll open up the phones to give you a chance to join the conversation today. 1-800-351-1212. Star, thank you for coming, and let's do this again sometime.
I will. Thank you.
Debbie and Dr. Merrill Matthews will be with us as well, but if you would like some more information about some of the individuals we are talking with today, if you'd like to see some of the articles we've posted, they're all available at the website, pointofview.net. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after these important messages.
In case you haven't noticed, this is not NPR. We believe in truth, that right and wrong are not just personal preferences, and we don't get corporate or taxpayer support. If you are a member of Truth Team 360, thank you. Thank you for stepping up and continuing to step up. And if you're not, please don't think someone else will step up. Today is the day for you to step up. We need you to be a part of Truth Team 360. Visit pointofview.net/team. Choose your level of support. Choose your Truth Team gift, a tote or sport bag, whichever fits your style. Pointofview.net/team. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Pointofview.net/team. Again, today is your day to join the team. Pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition. If you'd like to join our conversation, we'll open up the phones, 1-800-351-1212. We'll take some of those phone calls and get to those in just a few minutes. In studio with us still is Dr. Merrill Matthews and Debbie Georgatos. And before we get into some of the other specifics, maybe we just need to look at trends. Buddy Matthews, you know, we've talked about this in the past, that you don't want to make definite predictions about who's going to be the nominee, because we were told a while back by people that supposedly know a lot more than those of us around the table that the final three nominees would be Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush and then maybe Scott Walker. Mm-hmm. Well, 2 out of 3 don't look real good right now. What do you think? So sometimes you got to guess, as even the pundits don't, and nobody predicted that Donald Trump would be doing this well, right?
Nobody predicted that except Donald Trump.
So what about this?
Well, it's absolutely true. If you go back to 1900 and you look at the presidential election races, when a party held the office for 2 full terms,
that's true,
it shifted to the next person or to the other party in every case except for one. And that was when George Herbert Walker Bush ran for the 3rd term of Ronald Reagan. Yeah. So you had FDR holding longer, but when he died and when Truman comes in, he's not there for 2 full terms, so it shifts over to Eisenhower, but it's almost always shifts to the other party. So I've argued that, and that's regardless of who was running on the Democratic and Republican side. So I think Hillary actually has a steep hill to climb just to beat the historical averages there.
Yes, well, let's talk about what she has in her advantage. And for those of you that have something to take notes with, put down 3 numbers, 18, 6, and 242. 18 means that there are 18 states, and you could add the District of Columbia, in the 6 consecutive presidential elections have voted Democratic, which ultimately is 242 votes. Now we'll do Electoral College 101. She only has to dig up another 28 votes. She gets Florida, she wins. She gets Ohio, Colorado, she wins. So the Democrats at the moment look like they start with 242 electoral votes. But there are some questions as to whether or not those 6 consecutive elections are going to be predictive in the future. I think you pretty much have to say New York and California. I'm from California. Debbie's originally from New York. We know they're going to go blue. They're going to go Democratic. But there are other of those states maybe won't this time. But again, she has that advantage, but she has, of course, the historical disadvantage. Any comments?
Sure. I think that Hillary, she was so devastated by the 2008 election results where she did not win the primary then. And I think she knew this kind of thing that Dr. Matthews was pointing out a moment ago, that that was the time to win. She really thought it was the time to win, and she knows these kind of things that we're talking about. So she sees herself in this disadvantage, and that her people understand that also. And so she's she's fighting an uphill battle, but I think she also is of the mindset, this is my last chance, given her age, and I'm not saying she's too old to be effective, but I mean, given her age, it's unlikely she's going to run again in 4 years or 8 years. So this is her hill to die on, this election cycle. And I think she's seen by many, many people as she's a woman. It's her turn. It's time for America. There's a lot of that sentiment out there that's helping her. And she's barring indictment, she will be the candidate on the left. And then the real question is, what is the right contrast to her on the GOP side? Because I do think that I agree the historical trend, and I think it should follow through and carry out in this case, also because President Obama isn't real popular. People are concerned about the direction of the country, but it still matters so much who's on the other side, the GOP side, saying the message, like Star Parker said a moment ago about the importance of saying the message right to lower income Americans about our answers are better for you. We need that kind of person who can speak that language and draw a lot of voters in. And Kerby, if I don't mean to put you in the spot, but who are the other 4 of those 6 states? Do you happen to know? I'm taking notes. Like you should be taking notes if you're listening. New York, California, you know?
Oh, of the other 18, there's 18 states. Oh,
you said 6 consecutive. Oh, sorry, never mind. You don't know, never mind.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, there's 18 states.
18 states.
Over
six
six years. Yeah. Six
Okay.
consecutive presidential elections. And so, and again, they're pretty obvious states because they tend to be most of the Northeast, with the exception of New Hampshire. They tend to be the West, so it's California, Oregon, and Washington. And then you have a upper Midwest like Minnesota, things like that. Okay. So you have a pretty good idea what the 18 are. I can give it the list in just a minute in case anybody cares. But it's an illustration again, buddy, that in some respects, if you're a Democratic candidate, you do have right now the Electoral College is sort of in your favor. So that's something
that's the way it looks. But I would argue things are changing. You've got, I believe, 31 Republican governors out there.
There you go.
The large majority of the 99 state legislatures are controlled by Republicans. I can't remember. I think it's something like 25 states that have Republican governors and both houses as Republicans, whereas there's only 7 states that have a Democratic governor and both houses are controlled by Democrats. If you're a Republican and you're running as a governor and you can be elected as for instance in Illinois, you get that means a Republican can win statewide, and they have a Republican senator that won statewide. So it's interesting. Things are changing out there as some states, including Virginia and Florida, are becoming a little more purple, maybe even shifting a little bit. But other states seem to be shifting to a little bit to the red side.
Yeah, certainly. You have one other issue that I might as well put on the table since we're talking about votes, and that's the Christian vote. We've had George Barna on this program. We've had Gary Frazier on this program. We've had a number of others. There were 39 million. Here's another number if you want it. 39 million born-again Christians who did not vote in the last presidential election. So you put 39, and again, it breaks down 1/3, 2/3. So 13 million of them were not registered to vote. And then 26 million of them were registered to vote but did not vote. Now, there are all sorts of get-out-the-vote programs. We've talked about one or two where even in the last senatorial election in Alaska, they identified some of those 26 million that did not vote. And they then cross-reference them with these massive databases to say, well, this person did not vote. They actually have sent a gift to American Family Association, or they subscribe to World Magazine or Christianity Today. They probably are going to agree with us. And so they then contacted those individuals and asked them to pledge that they would vote on Election Day, and then followed up with them. Well, I think the plan that I see right now that Ted Cruz has, and George Will wrote about this recently, is to get out the Christian vote. And of course, all of us around the table recognize that if you could mobilize the Christian vote, if they're not minimized because they're saying, well, I can't vote for Mitt Romney because I don't agree with him, or he's a Mormon, or whatever the questions or the arguments are, but instead I'm going to vote because I like Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, whoever that is, then you change everything, don't you? You change the demographics pretty quickly.
And I would argue that Barack Obama changed the demographics by his get-out-the-vote effort, which in both campaigns were the best we've ever seen. And we were supposed to do the same thing on the Republican side, and that worked out very badly. But if any of the candidates are able to get the vote out, and especially energize the Christian vote, I think we could see a huge thing there that will really confuse the pollsters because they just didn't imagine that kind of change happening.
Yes.
You mentioned the last election cycle, the two last election cycles, and President Obama. The American left did such a better job than the right of using social media, and I think it is. We keep hearing on the GOP side, well, now we've gotten smart. We had a terrible experience 4 years ago, in 2012 election cycle on social media, but I actually do think I'm just aware of more campaigns really active on Twitter and really active on Pinterest. They are actually using them, and I think that helps with the young vote, especially, which is another demographic that the GOP has to really work on. And on the Christian vote, I love the very overt things that Ted Cruz and his father, Rafael Cruz, they're actually going directly to pastors' conferences. And Rafael Cruz, the dad of Ted Cruz, who is a pastor himself, actually gives talks to pastors about how important it is, how you can actually, it is part of your duty as a pastor and as a shepherd of your congregation to stand up for these basic things that are biblical principles that are impacted by what the government is doing in the country. So he is a very overt, direct thing, and I love it.
And it's interesting because if you're an evangelical Christian, you will have a number of options this time going into the primaries, good options to be able to vote on.
Yes. And matter of fact, that's something we can talk about a little bit later as well, because you, of course, are familiar with the fact we have Iowa caucus, we have the New Hampshire primary, we have the Nevada caucus, then we have South Carolina primary, and then all of a sudden we have Super Tuesday, 13 different states, or one case a caucus, all on the same day, March 1st, boom, and then you have a couple more, bing, bing, bing. And so this may be the first time that some of those states where you have much more of a born-again presence, not to minimize the born-again presence, so obviously in South Carolina, but in some cases where Christian vote will matter, because as some of us, well, all three of us right now live in the state of Texas, by the time it comes to us, it's pretty much already decided. That may not be the case next time. So love to get your comments about the Christian vote. We'll come back, though, and talk about some of these tax plans. And, of course, Social Security was really controversial in the debate, and some other issues. We'll try to get into some of the specifics. Of course, we have this budget deal that was pushed through by John Boehner before Paul Ryan, and I can see, as you could use a biblical phrase, Debbie Georgatos' countenance changed. Is that a biblical phrase, or countenance changed?
Yes, it is. Yes.
As soon as I just saw, we talked about the budget deal. So we have a lot more to talk about, but we certainly indeed do want to get your comments. So if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Dr. Merrill Matthews, Debbie Georgatos, and you right after this.
The United States military now has its third female Army Ranger. She's Major Lisa Jaster, a 37-year-old engineer, officer in the Army Reserve, and mom of two. A lot of doors can open for women if we go about it the right way, she said in an interview posted on Facebook. The right way, she said, includes being professional, thick-skinned, and ensuring that we minimize any special treatment. Minimize special treatment? A male who went through this year's training class that for the first time allowed women says they received a level of preparation not available to any of the men. It takes a minimum of 61 days to pass the grueling course. Major Jaster took 180. But hey, she made it. The course, based at Fort Benning, Georgia, began in April. 19 women started. None passed the first phase. The Washington Post reported that during each phase of the course, Major Jaster was held back through what is known as recycling, a common practice in which students are allowed to repeat a portion of the course, but only if they show promise and fell short in a specific aspect of training. Two younger females, Captain Kristen Greist and First Lieutenant Shay Haver, also graduated Ranger School a few weeks before Major Jaster. They were both also recycled twice in Phase 1. At a press conference, they said they were surprised they were allowed to repeat so many sections of the course in order to graduate. People magazine reported on the advantages awarded the women, which included a special 2-week training to get them ready for the school, and previews of tough courses, which the men didn't get. But the fix was already in January 2013, when then Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta declared all military jobs would be open to women. He gave the military 3 years to figure out how. One way, open up the elite forces. It's not just the Rangers. The Navy is planning to open SEAL training to women. The Marine Corps is balking at this. It conducted a study comparing the performance of all male infantry squads to co-ed squads. Not even close. But the Marines were accused of fixing the study. Too much good science for the new politically correct military. So, this January, the U.S. military is set to lift all restrictions and limits for women serving in the armed forces. That means women will serve in ground combat positions. This will put women in situations where they are less likely than men to survive. Young men will be killed because of this nonsense, and our military will be less effective. Our laws regarding military conscription require a next logical step. Army Secretary John McHugh confirmed it recently, saying that the military may be moving toward requiring that women register for the draft. Women serve well across the military, but this changes things. American families had better get ready. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We have in studio with us today Debbie Georgatos and Dr. Merrill Matthews. Let me take a phone call or two before we get into some of these issues that certainly need to be addressed. And Larry in Georgia, WAGP, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, sir. I was listening to this, and I commented the other day when you had some other things about the 18 states that always go for the Democratic side, and I was wondering if we have neglected to watch how Donald Trump has turned things around simply because he has avoided or actually just tossed out the window all political correctness.
Yes, well, he has, and Ben Carson have. I mean, if there are two people that are just railing against political correctness, it's Ben Carson and Donald Trump.
And they're the two leaders.
1 and 2. Go for it.
Well, I really believe that we have allowed the liberal sides to determine the way any conversation or any debate or anything goes by demanding political correctness when we need to throw that out the window.
Well, you are certainly going to have agreement around the table on that one, right?
I agree. I would like to see less political correctness, and they may set a precedent. We may be able to see less of it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And, your point also hints at, Larry, the 18 states we always presume will go Democrat. I love when I hear candidates say, I'm bringing my message to everyone. In fact, it's part of what Star Parker does, who was on with us earlier. Mm-hmm. She brings a conservative, pro-family, stay-in-school message to minority communities around the country that have very high rates of single parenthood, high poverty. She brings a conservative message. And I really love the idea because there is such a thing as truth. I love the idea of candidates not writing off any segment, any state, any demographic. Bring the truth of America and to me, which is on the American right now politically, to everyone and give them a chance to embrace it.
And, Rand Paul was the one who did that the most, and it hasn't helped him any, but he certainly tried.
Certainly tried. Let me take one more phone call. We'll get back into some of the specifics here, but I did want to give Patricia, KBJS in Texas. I think you wanted to encourage us to go out and vote.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. I know it's too much money to send out emails to every church in the United States, but I want to encourage people, especially the blue states, the people that call themselves Christians that hear this broadcast, to go to their churches and make it possible for unregistered voters to get registered easily, but also to vote the Bible as close as possible and, Christian principles. And if they call themselves a Christian, to vote that way. And then I think they will be doing what they should do.
Good. Well, this broadcast is heard in stations in 40 different states, so we've covered them pretty well, and a good number of them are the so-called blue states, so that is the case. Let me, for just a few minutes, have everybody around the table talk about the tax plans. You have Donald Trump's tax plan, and he unveiled it in the Wall Street Journal. And, of course, IPI, that organization that you are with, Dr. Merrill Matthews, did some analysis there. More recently, of course, then you have Ted Cruz announced his just the other day on the Wall Street Journal, and, of course, there were some questions asked of Ben Carson about his tax plan. It seems that more and more of these individuals, Dr. Matthews, are moving towards a flat tax, and that, in the case of Donald Trump, says that if you have file a joint income and you make more than $50,000, you won't pay taxes at all. So a lot of Americans, I think, if they understood these plans, would think that this is really a good idea.
Yes, Donald Trump has 4 rates in his, but the lowest is 0, so that doesn't really count in some sense. So it's more like 3 rates.
Yes.
But he's got he's got 3 tiers there. That's not bad. Ted Cruz, you mentioned, came out. He wants to do a flat tax above of 10% above. I believe you get to keep like $26,000 or something like that, $36,000. And then you get to keep above that. What's also interesting is they are taking on the business tax, the corporate tax, which is now 35%, largest in the developed world.
Yes.
Donald Trump wants to make it a flat 15%. Rand Paul has suggested a 14% tax, but he wants to make it what we call a VAT tax. Ted Cruz has a 16% business tax, but it is also a VAT tax. And a VAT tax means you simply tax every aspect of the production of something. So if I make chairs and I go out and buy some upholstery and I buy some wood to build the frame and so forth, I have to pay taxes on that under their plans. I wouldn't under current law. And so that tax sort of builds up. Most conservatives have opposed a VAT tax because it's so easy to hide what the rate is. So it's interesting that Rand Paul and Ted Cruz both support a VAT tax in there, and Trump's is just a flat one.
Yes. But again, also in this IPI piece that we've posted here, you say, well, forgetting the tax plan for a minute, his immigration plan and building a wall, of course, After all, he says Mexico's going to pay for it.
That's right.
But the immigration plan, it could be very expensive too. So that's the other side of that, isn't it?
There's cost there. One of the things Trump says is he's going to cut spending. He doesn't give any specifics. We haven't had a lot of specifics yet about what they're going to cut in spending. But I think all of us realize you have a huge amount of money out there that the government spends that could easily be cut, and you could balance a much lower tax and still have it balanced.
Yes.
You know, on this tax thing, I love that they're getting more specific, and it is incumbent on every candidate to be as specific as they can, and it does help among primary voters to sort between them. But the masses of people we need to bring in to see that the conservative message, that conservative politics and ideas are better for them, they aren't going to follow details like this.
Right.
I mean, I think it's wonderful. I love.
They get confused by the details. I had somebody call me the other day and say, I wouldn't vote for these Republican candidates because they're going to raise my taxes. I'm going, wait a minute, that's just the opposite of what they said. So it gets confusing after a while.
They can't follow it. And I do understand that. I'm not a good numbers person, but I did in the most previous debate. Carly Fiorina talked about a 3-page tax plan. Now, I don't know what it is she meant exactly, but the concept is essentially saying we're either going to have a flat sales tax or a flat income tax, a simple thing, because she had some numbers. It was over 50% of Americans cannot compute their own taxes. They have to go to some assistance to even do it. I think that would be a message that would resonate. We just want to make it really simple. It has to work, of course. It can't be just an idle throw out everything and come up with some haphazard policy. But a simple thing, I think you'd bring more people in with really simple ideas.
Yeah.
And remember, Herman Cain, that was his spiel, 999.
999. Remember that?
Yeah.
And we really don't want the IRS to look at our taxes because right now we're impeaching the IRS chief, aren't we? So they're going to be busy trying to defend themselves in the House of Representatives. Let me take a real quick phone call because this one I think is aimed at Debbie and Bonnie in North Carolina, Good News Network. I think you wanted to ask about that idea of technology. Go for it.
I'm older, but I use a computer. I use iPhone. I use, I do use those things, but I'm not on Twitter. But what I want to know is, if the media is so important in elections now, who's listening? No, people are in classes. If there are students, they're teaching, they're working. If they are employed, they can't just answer every Twitter, every Facebook message and all. So I don't understand why that is so important.
Sure. And Debbie, I want to give you, we're getting close to a break here, but why is it important that the candidates are on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all these kinds of things? What's the point?
It's because they're very easy and fast to use. I can relate, Bonnie. I really don't watch TV. I have no time for TV, but I do have a Twitter handle and I'm on Twitter a lot. You can read sitting at the gas station, waiting while your gas is pumping. You can run through 10 messages. Wow, I didn't know that Ben Carson said this. I didn't know Trump did that. You get quick pieces of information and, you can read later. You can go off on a link and read later, but it's actually a very fast source, Twitter being the one I like the most, of absorbing and learning lots of information and getting links to go read about it later. It makes somebody in a hurry think, wow, I could skim through this.
Yeah, especially if you're younger. And I'm thinking in our audience, the ones watching the program today, they all fit in. They probably are in there. And it's also a way to bypass the mainstream media.
It's a way to bypass the mainstream media. And as you point out, one of the reasons you want to be on Twitter is because that's where younger people are.
Yeah. And if you want that youth vote, that's certainly a very important way to get that. Bonnie, you asked a good question. I just had to hurry up because the breaks wait for no one, as we say. So we'll take a break. We'll come back. We have much more to talk about. We've sort of mentioned some of it, but we'll get back. And if you'd like to know more about some of the things we've talked about, visit the website, pointofview.net. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
At dinner recently, I was struck by the couple in front of me. They were allegedly spending a night out together, but the only time they communicated in a half hour was one time when the man showed what was on his phone to the woman, and then back to their own screens. We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You'll find us online with your phone, your tablet, your laptop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues. You can also follow our new YouTube video series, Uncensored. Stay informed. Follow us on Twitter at Point of View RTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Again, at Point of View RTS. We'd love you to retweet us, to share our Facebook posts, but please don't do it when you're out with your family or someone you love. We can wait. We're online 24 hours a day. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, it is Weekend Edition, and we welcome your phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. Debbie Georgatos, Dr. Merrill Matthews with us, and we will certainly go around the round table, but let me take a phone call left over from the last hour. We'll head out to Kentucky first. Rhonda, you have the floor. What would you like to ask?
Well, what I would like to know is, and none of you are probably not able to answer this, but why is it that Congress can vote themselves to raise it, and the Senate, and yet still deny cost of living raises to those on Social Security? Not SSI, Social Security, the people who worked for it.
Good question. First of all, can Congress vote itself a raise? That actually goes back to an amendment that was added all the way to James Madison, but also Social Security. So let's go around the round table, because I think that is a good example of how Congress can do things to help themselves, but they sometimes don't even have to live under the same laws that everybody else does.
Social Security has a provision in there, and if inflation is not going up, Social Security does not have to provide an increase, and that's what's happened here the last 2 or 3 years, I believe. So, so the good news is we've got little or no inflation. The bad news is it hits, all of us are seeing prices rise, even though officially there doesn't seem to be any inflation, and that hits seniors because they're stuck on that, and Congress is, interestingly, there's a provision there when they raise it, they actually raise the amount a little higher than they would if it's just a sort of the cost of living increase, or what's called their cost of living increase. And they're wanting to change that, but as long as inflation stays low, we're probably safe in terms of that aspect.
Any comments?
I like term limits because honestly, these kind of things frustrate me so much. I agree with you. I mean, I understand you have to have some formula in place. We can't just have a random decision at every time a new Congress comes along, whether to increase or how to increase Social Security. We have to have a formula that makes sense and we can be reliably calculating based on it. But the graphics or just the image of Congress voting itself a raise again, and then versus, as you're saying, the Social Security recipients who actually work to earn it, not getting a raise. The graphics aren't good. And I just think the pressure on Congress, I really would love to see term limits, which I know wasn't your question, but there's no other way to stop these kinds of things from happening to make Congress more accountable. But maybe Dr. Merrill is just...
Well, let me answer Rhonda in a little bit different way, because Star Parker mentioned this. If you want to address the issue of wealth and income inequality, letting people put their FICA tax, the money that goes to Social Security, into a private account, so that they are retiring with $500,000, $1 million when they retire, that addresses that problem. Congress does not have to provide you with a raise. Congress right now, if we go to 2033 without any changes, there will be something like a 25% cut in reimbursement in Social Security checks, because the trust fund, which doesn't have any money in it anyway, will be officially
the fake trust fund.
The fake trust fund will be officially bankrupt. So the real answer to this, Rhonda, is something Ted Cruz and typically Republicans, though not many of them this time, they want to move to a private account where people put their FICA tax, their payroll tax, into their own personal account. When they retire, that money belongs to them. It's part of their estate. And it is the quickest way to address the wealth gap, because you would have millions of Americans retiring as millionaires just because of interest.
Yep. You know, it's an interesting thing when it seems so simple that Dr. Matthews just explained. What would be the reason a a politician would be against that. And there are two things. One is that a lot of people in Congress, especially on the left, they want to control money. They want the money in the control of the federal government. But the argument they make is, well, people out there in America, we don't really think you're responsible enough. We don't think you're competent. You'll probably mess up. You won't save. I mean, both answers they give are really obnoxious. Really, there is no reason from a purely respect for the American people, trust in the people, wanting to have a good financial outcome, not to go to a system like Dr. Matthews and Star Parker.
And Kerby, you and I've talked about the 3 counties in Texas that opted out of Social Security 35 years ago, and they went to what I call a banking model. So the money is handed to a financial planner who guarantees them 3.75% interest rate, or they lost money. They're not day trading with it because it's like a bank. You put the money into the account and a expert does that. But even if you just simply said, we're going to take the money and we're going to put it in the S&P 500, a broad-based S&P 500 fund, over the last 30 years, S&P 500 has gone up on average about 10% a year. That's good income.
Yes.
Okay, I'm the newbie. I've only been in Texas 15 years. I had no idea there were 3 counties that did that.
Are.
Okay,
Isn't
we're
that
not going to it now, but that's
amazing.
amazing.
You can look at Chile, or you can look at other examples. We have a few of those around there. But back to the point, and this is where, not that any politician is ever a demagogue, but, just on the possibility.
Perish the thought.
Yeah, perish the thought. What we always hear, and I've already gotten some phone calls even yesterday about Ben Carson is going to destroy and take away Medicare. Chris Christie is going to end Social Security. Now, Chris Christie looks in the camera. Remember, at this one point, that was one of the most powerful parts of his presentation. And the government has lied to you, and it is stolen from you. And yet, people don't get that message. And as soon as people start talking about even making small changes in Social Security, remember how well that worked for George W. Bush in 2005?
The wheelchair over the edge of the cliff.
Boom. There's where we go. Is that a problem that we're going to have to face again?
Well, we may have to face it, but maybe we come to a crisis where we do, or maybe we have a president who will push it through, as Obama did Obamacare. But Chris Christie he wants to take Social Security, and for higher income seniors, he wants to begin reducing the benefits. And that gets back to something Starr talked about. We're talking about taking benefits away from people who have paid into them. And my own sense is you may be wealthy, but you have paid into the system. Yeah. And so
that's what Mike Huckabee was making the case during the debate.
I think that's exactly right. So I'm very reluctant to start reducing people's benefits. Plus, we've seen this many times. If you do that, Democrats immediately come out and say, Republicans are going to cut your benefits, whether it's true or not, whether it even hit those people or not. And all of a sudden you're fighting the narrative of seniors saying these Republicans are going to cut my benefits, and I can't afford that.
Yeah. But Ted Cruz was saying, wait, I'm 44 years of age, and we and those who are younger are saying, I'm not sure it's going to be there. I mean, they did one survey a while back where they actually found that some that were 20-something, 30-something said that they had a greater likelihood of seeing a UFO, an alien, than getting Social Security.
That was a Frank Luntz survey.
You remember that one, right?
It was years ago.
I love having a buddy because he remembers all these things.
They're
just
probably
like I do.
right.
Yeah, they're probably right. And so, again, to have a twofold model and say, if you're getting Social Security right now, you will continue to get it. If you paid into the system, you will get it. But those of you that are younger, we're going to give you some options. And if you want to see how well it worked, go look at those 3 counties in the state of Texas that said, we're going to opt out of Social Security. We can do better by putting it in the bank than putting it in a trust fund where there's just a bunch of IOUs.
They retire with roughly twice what they would get from Social Security. The money belongs to them. They have, instead of a $255 death benefit, they get a life insurance policy that pays 4 times their salary up to $215,000. So if you die, you also get to leave that much money to your estate. They have a disability provision in there because Social Security does. If you get hurt, you get to go on the disability, and they also pay your premiums for that Social Security while you're on disability.
Are you sold there, Debbie? What do you think?
I'm just shaking my head. I had no idea these counties existed. I'm going to read about this. And I do love that politicians, I think it's an important point that for politicians, especially in the conservative side, to seem fair, talking about anything that says you paid in, but now we're changing the deal at the point in your life when you're getting benefits, that's a non-starter. But I would love to have people, I'm sorry, we're at 7 seconds left. I would love to have a system change. We'll talk about after the break.
Sorry. We will do that. We'll talk about that system change right after the break.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Tomorrow is October 31st. Most people know it as Halloween, but it also has long been known as the Festival of the Dead. The Celtic tribes and their priests, the Druids, celebrated this day as a marker for the change from life to death. November 1st was the beginning of the new year, so Halloween or Samhain was like New Year's Eve. It was both a time of death and new beginnings. The young would wander the countryside disguised in scary masks, carrying turnips carved to scary jack-o'-lanterns to frighten off ghosts and goblins. They believed that the veil between the living and the dead was believed to be the thinnest at that time, and therefore one could readily communicate with loved ones in spirit. Deuteronomy 18 warns us not to be involved in any activity that includes divination. The term Halloween is shortened from All Hallows Even, as it is the evening before All Hallows Day, also known as All Saints' Day. Pope Gregory moved the day from May 13th to November 1st. This made Halloween the eve of the celebration of November 1st and became All Hallows Mass, and October 31st became All Hallows Even. You know, today, Halloween has become one of the most celebrated holidays. We're told that people spend more on decorations at Halloween than any other holiday except Christmas. And often, the Halloween decorations have included more and more occultic activity. So I believe Christians have two options: to ignore Halloween or to provide an alternative. Many churches now provide a fall fun festival. I hope you have thought through what you will do tomorrow. Don't just go with the flow. Make an informed decision about what you will do on Halloween. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Kind of ended up on Social Security just a moment ago because of Rhonda's question. I'd love to stay on that for another minute because there is a lot of miscommunication and a lot of deliberate misinformation about that. And that is going to be, I suspect, a campaign issue because let's count the number of people that were on that stage. There are 10 people on the stage, and I know certainly Chris Christie talked about it, Ted Cruz talked about it. We know that Mike Huckabee talked about it, John Kasich talked about it. I can go down a pretty long list of individuals that talked about Social Security. So if for no other reason, Debbie, we're going to be hearing about that, and so maybe we need to clear up some of the miscommunication and misinformation that people have about what Republican candidates want to do or not to do in regard to the issue of Social Security.
Yes, I think the point that Dr. Matthews made just before the break, that is among the easiest issues for the American left to demagogue, to instill fear in the hearts of just people who aren't policy wonks, who aren't going to read closely and understand. If the Democrats are saying the Republicans are going to cut your Social Security benefits, they're going to take your grandmother off, she'll be eating out of, she'll be eating dog food, all those kind of things they do. It means if there's going to be serious reform of any sort of entitlement, it's going to take a lot of repeated explanations. It's going to take the ability to distill down ideas into short bullet points that you can be repeated over and over and over for people to comprehend, because we literally can't continue in eternally in perpetuity the present entitlement spending we have. Things have to change. And so I do think it's a very important point to say everyone agrees they're not going to take anything away from someone who's already paid in, whatever their income level happens to be at this point. If they paid in, they're entitled. But by the same token, the young voters, and Kerby, you said before the break, there was that poll that showed that young people thought they're more likely to see a UFO than to actually get Social Security. So you have young people who tuned in. This isn't working, and the math isn't going to be there for me. So I think that's a great group for the conservative side to target, to say, look, we agree with you that the system isn't working. There has to be a proposal that essentially says, for younger people, we're going to work hard to have something, to have a system in place that helps you toward in your retirement years, but it's not going to be our present Social Security system. And so I respect that Ken is trying to work out the details of that, and then the very complex job of reducing it down to comprehensible bullet points. And I don't know who's doing that yet, but it's vital to send the message, of course, we're not taking money away from people. We forced you to pay into taxes, and now you're eligibility age, and we're saying never mind. But for young voters, by the same, it's almost equally compelling a necessity for the GOP to say, yeah, we're going to change it to something that works for you, that's fair to you.
Well, one of the reasons that George Bush did poorly on his Social Security reform in 2005 is he came out and he said, we're going to have to make some cuts here. Oh, and incidentally, we'll probably have these private accounts for you as well. Democrats attacked the private accounts and they attacked the cuts, and it was a major defeat for Bush in trying to do that. Republicans have long supported personal accounts, but you're only hearing a few of them talk about them now. What you'll hear is that, in general, the Republican establishment says we need to make cuts to the entitlements. We need to scale back on certain things. And that, I would argue, is the wrong message. I think you ought to be going out with a positive message of, we've got Social Security. We're not going to change it for those of you who wanted it. But for those of you who would like to opt out, we have got a deal for you. And rely on the young people to move in that, because young people are familiar with 401ks and IRAs, have been doing these things. And I think you'd find that, that would actually be a good selling point, but you can't do it by saying we're going to kill the old program in some way. You've got to say we've got a new option out there for those of you who want to do it.
I love that. I have a quick question about those counties that opted out. In those counties, do the people who are putting money into private accounts, so it's not government run?
No.
Do they have access to that prior to retirement age, or are they blocked from access to it?
If they leave, they have access to it. But as long as they are working for the county, it stays in the account.
And they cannot access it till some retirement age.
Right.
Yeah, because that's what's vital, is because the concern about, people may not be very responsible. We have these private accounts. They might raid it because they decide they really want that trip to Hawaii. I have to make it clear, you can't do that. You still
right. And that's why I call that a banking model as opposed to an IRA model. Yeah. So you think of it like a bank, a savings account or something, where I give the money to the bank and the bank invests it and pays me an interest. That's what happens there.
Sure. Some questions, obviously, on Social Security. So let's take one right now, and then we'll get into some other topics in just a minute. In Texas, KCTA, is it Porfy? Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I haven't heard of that up and out of Social Security. This is not right, Social Security. I'm 68 years old. I have 70,000 plus, and if something would happen to me right now, die or something, that money stays in the state. It doesn't go to my family. But if this up and out thing, that money would go to your family. This is just not right. Social Security is not right.
Good point. First of all, whether it's a medical savings account or this banking model, this gives you a chance to pass it on to your heirs. There's nothing like that right now with Social Security.
That's right. If you work in Social Security and you work in that system for 40 years and you die at the age of 64 or 65 before it's now 66 for the full retirement age, and you've not taken anything out, if you have a spouse who never qualified, then that spouse will be qualified to get benefits based upon the spousal. But if you're not married, or if your spouse worked and qualified for herself or himself, you essentially lose that money. $255 goes to the estate.
Wow.
And I think that the same thing's true with Medicare. I think that's outrageous.
Yes.
Somebody can work 40 years and lose all that contribution.
Porfy, I know you wanted to make another comment before we go around the round table. What were you going to say?
I'm just going to say Social Security is wrong. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and again, this is why whether you look at health savings accounts, medical savings accounts compared to Medicare, or whether you look at what we'll call the banking model for a minute compared to Social Security, when the government owns it, the government steals from it, and if you die prematurely, you get zero. We don't do that with life insurance policies, and we don't do that now with medical savings accounts, but we do that with Social Security.
And you could do the same thing with Medicare, because we pay a Medicare payroll tax that goes to cover hospitals. You could let a person that go into a private account, let it grow with the S&P 500 or something of that nature. Right now, under Medicare Advantage, which about a third of seniors choose voluntarily to go in Medicare Advantage, the government just writes a check to the HMO, and that HMO promises to cover the senior for the whole year. Well, if the government's just writing out a yearly check to an HMO, I could write my own check to the HMO. So let me have the money in the account, and then I'll make a decision, and I'll write my own check.
I love it. Go ahead.
Although that whole spirit of what you're describing, Dr. Matthews, would so appeal to young voters. I mean, you're right about the positive messaging. Instead of using any bad words, a lot of political advisors say don't use bad words like cut, eliminate, reduce, but a positive message. And this would be great for young voters to hear, and have some candidate really, honestly, youthful looking candidate really in a positive way see this as an opportunity. It's a better thing for you. It's a choice we're giving you. That would really resonate with young voters.
Just before we take a break, I wanted to pull off of something that you've written recently, Dr. Merrill Matthews in Forbes, and that is many of our listeners actually have gone into the Christian healthcare sharing ministries. I always have trouble getting all those words out. The Christian healthcare sharing ministries with MediShare and Samaritans and all the others. And we've had the various experts on the program. But one of the questions that's always been in the back of people's minds is, okay, this is where I share this and I can opt out of Obamacare, and I like that, and I'm not supporting practices that I disagree with and all of the rest. But the big question has always been, what if there's a major accident or I get cancer? And you actually have written about the fact, working with, I guess it's Bill Brand, that they can actually put together a life insurance policy, a term life insurance policy that would allow you to actually get an accelerated benefit provision. And so one of the questions that keeps some people from opting out of Obamacare and going into one of these healthcare sharing ministries, actually, there's a very good answer to that.
That's right. When Bill Brand called and told me what they did at their agency, and I thought this was good, so I did a Forbes piece on that. But essentially, they provide several aspects. I think the key aspect is a life insurance policy with an accelerated benefit. And what that means is you buy the life insurance policy, it's term insurance. If you die, you get the face amount. But if you have a major medical accident or illness, it will provide some of the benefits of that life insurance policy to you in cash. So let's say you have a $500,000 policy and you end up needing heart surgery or something like that, and you need $100,000 for that. The life insurance company cuts you a check for $100,000, and your life insurance benefits go down to maybe $400,000, so you don't have a $500,000 policy anymore, but you got $100,000 to pay for that medical care. So the point of that is, by taking that life insurance, it's life insurance, so it's outside of the healthcare system completely, using those accelerated benefits, you could add a little extra measure of safety to somebody who says, I like the healthcare sharing ministries, but what if I needed a heart transplant or something like that? Then you've got additional money that you could draw on to be able to help that. Now, they add a cancer policy to it also, and they add a short-term thing to give you some cash up front. But you could look at the various things, but it's a way to get around Obamacare with real insurance that covers you.
Again, we've had some of the leaders of things like MediShare as well as Samaritans Ministries, and there have been a number of our listeners that have done that to opt out of Obamacare, but the big question mark is always, what if there's a big medical expense? And the good news is, I think you've figured out a way to do that, and so we wanted to have some of that information available to our listeners as well. So thanks for writing that in Forbes. That's been one of the deal breakers. We'll be right back.
Why does Kerby Anderson do what he does? Because he believes in God's ability to use you to make a difference.
There's a real need for us to articulate a responsible biblical perspective and to give people an understanding of what is happening in the world, and in addition to educating them, to then empower them to go out and make a difference for Christ.
Together we can push back the growing darkness. It's not going to be easy, but by God's grace, it is happening, one person, one community at a time. Join us in this mission. Become a monthly partner. $1 a day, $30 a month will make a huge difference. Or perhaps you can do $100 a month. We need partners of all sizes. We need you. Give today online at pointofview.net. At the top of the page, next to the Donate Now button, click on Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Mail your donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, or call 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Debbie Georgatos, Dr. Merrill Matthews. Let's take another phone call. We'll head out to Georgia. Annette, listening on the Good News Network. What would you like to add to the conversation today?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment. I'm separated from my husband now, but I've been married over 30 years, and he works for railroad. And railroad never pays into Social Security. They pay into railroad retirement.
Mm-hmm.
But in order for me to receive, which of course I'm eligible for the railroad retirement still because of the length of our marriage, but I've been paying into Social Security my entire life, of working life, and I'll never be able to receive Social Security because of railroad retirement.
Yes.
I can't have both. I can only have one or the other.
Yeah, and
that's
again,
just
I understand
crazy.
people upset about so-called double dipping, but that's just you paid into it, and now you don't get it because you're getting a benefit from somewhere else. That doesn't strike me as fair. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, I just think that's crazy that, I'm just in, every week when I get my paycheck and stuff, I'm like, I'm paying that money and I'll never see it. Because if I ever take it, I can't get the railroad retirement, which is a lot more than my Social Security would ever be.
There you go.
But she actually brings up an important part, because there's roughly 6 million Americans who are outside of Social Security because they work for their teachers, or they work for the railroad, they work for the state. And because of that, those various groups, those states, for instance, could move over to a Galveston type plan right now. Mm-hmm. If you're in Social Security, you can't do it. But if you're in one of those other plans that are outside, the railroad or some of the others, they could shift over to one of these right now.
So it's what's keeping them? Unions or just political?
Well, some of them
pressure?
have changed. For instance, Utah has about a year ago decided to move over from a defined benefit plan to a 401k type plan for new employees, new state employees. So they could make that decision. But I don't know that many of them know about it, even though we've been talking about it for 20 years.
And you can type your name in and find some of that material about that. Even
Absolutely.
those 3 counties that we were talking about, Galveston and Brazoria, and some of those. But again, this is, I just think, going to be one of those issues that might surface. And I had somebody ask the other day, well, what's going to happen in the future? And I said, well, if you've ever canoed down the Niagara River, there is a point of no return, in which if you see the falls, it is too late.
Yeah.
You will not make it to the shore in time.
Yeah.
And we are not there yet, but we're getting a lot closer than we've ever been to a point of no return. Chris Christie said that 71% of government spending is in entitlements. Now he's looking at more than Social Security. He's looking at Medicare, Medicaid, and some other entitlements, but still, we can't go down this road very long, or if you want to keep my metaphor going, we can't keep paddling down the river and not eventually recognize we're going to go over to the falls.
It's been a few years when government revenues were a little lower because we were still in the effects of the recession. But at that point, virtually every dollar the government took in revenue plus interest on the debt went to pay entitlements.
Yes. So there you go. That just doesn't work. Yeah, I mean,
That means everything that you were paying, the government, defense, all of that stuff was being paid for with borrowed money because almost every dollar went to entitlement.
Very well said.
This vision, I love that visual of going over the falls. I do think for so many people, and I will include myself in this group, I'm not great with math. I'm not a financial person, but you have heard this for 20 or 30 or 40 years. Gee, we're borrowing too much. The debt's too big. We can't afford this or that. And so people have become, it's kind of they're deadened to it. They think, well, I know everybody talks about this, but at the end of the day, nothing really bad ever happens. And I think the left has succeeded a lot in convincing people that when the alarm bells are raised about the debt or the deficit, that's kind of silly. It's not really a big problem. And so it's really going to take some political leaders in our country being able to articulate it in a way that hits home to me, to you, that says this will be your life, your inability of the government to pay this, and this, because otherwise most people's reaction to a lot of what we're saying is kind of, so what? Or, okay, that doesn't sound very good, but nothing bad ever seems to happen. But America keeps borrowing and nothing really bad happens, and we can somehow pay the interest on our debt. I feel concerned about it because I don't know how you make it resonate with people before it's too late.
Yeah.
But what Debbie says, just last night the Senate passed the budget deal.
There we go.
Which put $80 billion. I want to use a segue here.
Yeah,
put $80 billion, expanding spending by $80 billion, break the sequester caps. So even though you have so many people are talking about we've got to get control of the spending and so forth, Congress continues on.
Well, again, Senator Ted Cruz referred to this as the John Boehner budget deal, and he said basically that the deal was ridiculous, deceitful, and a disgrace. Tell me what you really think about it.
I think he was being kind.
Yeah, I think he's being kind. So here we go again, Debbie.
Well, also the serious people. People look at Washington and the kind of reputation of the conservatives is, well, we're the party that's really kind of more responsible. We're always arguing about fiscal, limited government and fiscal limitations and getting in control of the debt and not spending too much and reducing government spending. But at the end of the day, what Ted Cruz is saying is the John Boehner, which he's using him to refer to really the majority of the GOP in Washington, or at least a significant majority of the leadership in Washington, would rather, keep paddling, waiting for somebody else to give the signal from the side, hey, okay, you're getting really, really close to the falls now. There are a few voices like Ted Cruz, and he's dismissed by the John Boehners of the world as an alarmist, but he's talking about what's true. It's a frustrating thing, and the GOP does not really stand true to what they claim they will. I know they have published a list of who voted in the GOP side for this budget, House and Senate. But if you're listening to this and you're a senator or you're a representative in Congress voted for this budget-busting deal, they should be hearing from you.
John Cornyn voted for it.
Of course he did. Of course he did.
Yeah. So again, I think we just need to recognize some of the difficulties we have in trying to just get that information out. Because, I've had people call in here and say, no, I paid into Social Security. That money's in there. And they don't even realize that it's a
my name on it.
Yeah, they don't even realize it's a pay-as-you-go system. Or they think that, as we heard the other night, that there is actually money in that lockbox in the trust fund.
$2.7 trillion.
Yeah.
And interestingly, Secretary of the Treasury, Jack Lew, was recently saying, well, if we don't get this budget deal, we're not going to be able to pay Social Security benefits. Wait a minute. I thought we had $2.7 trillion in a trust fund, Jack. Where is that money? Of course, they borrowed it all, but you just have to deal with this stuff.
Yeah, well, and you have to deal with people that don't understand some of those details, and that's one of the difficulties you have.
It's the Disneyland dad, syndrome. I make this analogy, but seriously, there are people who go through a divorce and the wife is being realistic and she's saying, look, kids, we cannot afford this. We can only afford that. And the Disneyland dad, says, no, kids, we can afford it. And he's borrowing money they don't have and spending it. I mean to blame it on the men because women can be equally irresponsible. But this idea, people just want to believe, the vast majority of Americans want to believe somehow America is never going to change. We're not really going to have a crisis. Nothing bad could ever happen here. And they want to dismiss the serious concerns expressed by people like Ted Cruz as alarmist and politically motivated. But actually, economics are actually based on facts, and math is factual. I mean, we have to address these hard things. It's so hard to do politically, so hard.
Well, and just before we take a break, what about all the free stuff? That was something that was commented at the debate, that if you watch the Democratic debate, and I did, and we played a lot of the clips, and everything's free. Of course, again, let's recognize Senator Bernie Sanders is not going to be the nominee, but if you actually look at how much it would actually have cost, the Wall Street Journal, Buddy Matthews the other day did the numbers, and they concluded that if you actually did do everything that Bernie Sanders wants, that would cost you $18 trillion, which, interesting enough, is the same amount that we owe right now. We're not talking about $18 million. We're not talking about $18 billion. We're talking about $18 trillion. And the argument that he makes is that we will just tax the rich people.
Right.
And so I went and ran the numbers, and you can find it on my commentary here, in which if you actually could confiscate all the wealth of all the millionaires and billionaires, and believe me, you would not be able to confiscate the annual income of Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or whoever it might be, but just assume for a moment that you would be able to do so, you still wouldn't even come close to paying the interest on that $18 trillion, right?
Exactly. In my book, Ladies Can We Talk, I had several of those studies that is the same exact point. If you confiscate, if you made them melt everything they owned and liquidate it, hand it to the government, you couldn't pay the bills for a year.
Yeah.
And yet somehow this is going to go to a permanent entitlement he's going to create with all sorts of new promises of free things. It's a fantasy world.
Yeah. Well, you use the Disneyland dad. Some people have said, well, it's Santa Claus. But the other day, Tim Wildman was saying, no, the Democrats outdo even Santa Claus. So, again, we have to inject some of the ideas and the numbers without people's eyes glazing over. Otherwise, we are going to be on that little canoe going over the Niagara Falls, because we simply cannot continue down this road. And when each time the answer to any problem in the Democratic debate was, we're going to spend more money, we're going to create another agency, that just can't be the answer.
I would love to have, after the break, if Dr. Matthews or one of you had this answer, but very seriously, so suppose we got to the cliff and we got to the Niagara Falls and went over. What does that mean to the average American? As people say, the next morning the sun will come up, the car will start, we'll go to work. What could really bad happen?
Well, I don't think there'd be any Social Security checks in the mail, but we'll talk about that right after this.
The United States military now has its third female Army Ranger. She's Major Lisa Jaster, a 37-year-old engineer, officer in the Army Reserve, and mom of 2. A lot of doors can open for women if we go about it the right way, she said in an interview posted on Facebook. The right way, she said, includes being professional, thick-skinned, and ensuring that we minimize any special treatment. Minimize special treatment? A male who went through this year's training class that for the first time allowed women says they received a level of preparation not available to any of the men. It takes a minimum of 61 days to pass the grueling course. Major Jaster took 180. But hey, she made it. The course, based at 19 women started. None passed the first phase. The Washington Post reported that during each phase of the course, Major Jaster was held back through what is known as recycling, a common practice in which students are allowed to repeat a portion of the course, but only if they show promise and fell short in a specific aspect of training. 2 younger females, Captain Kristen Greist and First Lieutenant Shay Haver, also graduated Ranger School a few weeks before Major Jaster. They were both also recycled twice in Phase 1. At a press conference, they said they were surprised they were allowed to repeat so many sections of the course in order to graduate. People magazine reported on the advantages awarded the women, which included a special 2-week training to get them ready for the school, and previews of tough courses, which the men didn't get. But the fix was already in January 2013, when then Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta declared all military jobs would be open to women. He gave the military 3 years to figure out how. One way, open up the elite forces. It's not just the Rangers. The Navy is planning to open SEAL training to women. The Marine Corps is balking at this. It conducted a study comparing the performance of all male infantry squads to co-ed squads. Not even close. But the Marines were accused of fixing the study. Too much good science for the new politically correct military. So, this January, the U.S. military is set to lift all restrictions and limits for women serving in the armed forces. That means women will serve in ground combat positions. This will put women in situations where they are less likely than men to survive. Young men will be killed because of this nonsense, and our military will be less effective. Our laws regarding military conscription require a next logical step. Army Secretary John McHugh confirmed it recently, saying that the military may be moving toward requiring that women register for the draft. Women serve well across the military, but this changes things. American families had better get ready. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
After a few more minutes, if you'd like to join us, we might be able to get another phone call in, but I thought we would go around the roundtable one more time. In my commentary that came out October 26th, I pointed out, as I mentioned before, let me just give you one number, that if you were to actually confiscate the wealth of those individuals that make at least $10 million a year or more, and we're talking about Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Mark Zuckerberg and people like that, that only, quote, gives you $240 billion, which sounds like a lot. That actually would pay for the government for 24 days, or it would be at best a little bit of a initial down payment on $18 trillion that Bernie Sanders is talking about. So this idea that we're going to tax the rich even more and pay for this is just ridiculous. But okay, you ask a question, Debbie, and I'll see what Dr. Merrill Matthews has. We head down the road. What happens if we finally just get to the point where we simply cannot send out all the checks for Social Security. We can't fund food stamps, EFT cards, and things like that. What happens? Any thoughts?
The rating firms downgrade us. Our debt becomes junk. The interest rate has to go up in order. We've seen it in Greece.
Yes.
I mean, Greece has already sort of given an
That's a preview of
example.
coming attractions, right? Yeah.
And Puerto Rico's on the road to this. So the debt becomes junk. You have to pay a lot more in interest. One of the reasons why we can do so much right now is because there's virtually no interest.
No interest.
Once that interest explodes, then you have problems. And so we become sort of a bankrupt third world nation, much like Zimbabwe was. You get inflation in the money. The money starts, as we start printing money to try to pay the debts, inflation explodes and money becomes worthless. And it's, like I said, look at Greece or Zimbabwe or some of the others.
Yeah, right over here. As a matter of fact, I should have brought them in because I've got $10 trillion Zimbabwe notes. There was one time when a Zimbabwe dollar was worth just a little bit more than the U.S. dollar. And I'll hand them out to all of you because I've got multiple copies of it if you like to do it. $10 trillion Zimbabwe notes, which were worth less than the paper that they were printed on. And that's what happens because eventually, back to your point, Dr. Matthews, the government might have to print money, and the more money you print, the less valuable it is. And so then you have just runaway inflation. And years ago, we did an interview with somebody in studio here that was a missionary there in Zimbabwe when all that was happening. And it was horrific. I mean, all the things you heard about in pre-Nazi Germany, the Weimar Republic and all that, where people were stealing the wheelbarrows full of cash, leaving the cash and taking the wheelbarrow because the wheelbarrows were worth more than the cash. And the same kinds of things were happening there in Zimbabwe. We don't want that happening in America, do we?
I thought that was a really helpful moment in America to watch what was happening with Greece. And I think when that story was going on, I was trying to cover it in my radio show really often just to say, this is not some, this is a long-standing, Greece is a great place in world history. It's a long-standing culture. It has, a lot of beauty. People love to travel there. It's a vacation. It's a tourist destination. And if you don't get economics right, you can have this kind of collapse. There was a picture of a man standing outside an ATM. And I showed him on the picture I put up on our Facebook page about how he's standing. He was a retired, some profession. And he said, his question was, why didn't anyone warn us? There was no money left in the ATM. It was a great moment.
And let's make the point. Greece was run by socialist governments for years.
Yes.
Left wing. Yes.
Are we back to the Margaret Thatcher quote?
Yes. And that's exactly right. Yes. They finally ran out of other people's money.
They ran out of other people's money. Very good.
Yeah, and the answer was people did warn them. I mean, there are people in the world, and in America, you are being warned. We are being warned.
Yes.
I'll be willing to listen.
Well, normally we start the program out talking about religious liberty. I thought we'd just end real quickly with that. Some of you, as you heard yesterday, we've been following the story of Coach Joe Kennedy up there at Bremerton. Goes to 50-yard line, prays, and they tell him not to pray, and he does so, and of course now he has been put on administrative leave. So we'll follow that maybe in the future. But I thought another one on this religious liberty issue, I think some of you might know Keith Self. He's a Collin County judge, and he gave me permission to use this. The other day he was going to welcome new U.S. citizens at their naturalization ceremony in Dallas. He was asked to submit his remarks, and he was told that he could not actually participate because his statements included religious remarks. And the religious remarks that caused the problem were these. That we hold these truths to be self-evident, that they are all endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. I won't go into the whole details here, but we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That was the quote that got him in trouble, and that's why they decided to not have him actually speak, because he was using religious words. In case any of our listeners do not know, those are the words from the Declaration of Independence.
That is, I saw Keith Self's Facebook posting. I didn't know what the language was. I saw he had just summarized, not permitted to use religious language. And whatever he would have said would have been fine. But the idea that somebody thinks the Declaration of Independence is the language is impermissible, it is shocking. And, we do the show so often. We talk in every segment. We've talked many weeks about religious liberty in America. And, this example, it has what this is saying is this mentality that Christianity or a place of God in public life is not really something you can say out loud, whether it's the case of the football coach, who I think we're going to talk about in a moment. It is pervaded, the teaching world is pervaded economics, academia has pervaded the government mentality that somehow this is just the norm, the politically correct norm is we never mention God. And that's somehow held up as an American virtue. And it is so wrong. It is so off. And I don't know that Keith Self probably isn't going to pursue any claim about this, but it's outrageous.
Yeah. Well, and again, he said, so I won't be sharing these inspiring words with our new citizens. They harken back to our founding, when our founding fathers understood tyranny and weren't afraid to pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. Mm-hmm. But they aren't allowed today. And that's a quote from a document in 1776, which we like to strip up from the walls of our public schools because, after all, it mentions God, and we have, quote, a separation of church and state. You look like you have one more of these religious liberty issues, and I'll give you the chance to tell us about what is happening there.
I'll try to quickly summarize it, but there were gentlemen who've been hired by a trucking company, and they, obviously drive trucks and deliver things, and they have been let go because they refused to drive certain trucks, which contained alcohol. And the plaintiffs in this case, the ones complaining, they're Muslim, and they were saying their religion does not permit them to drive trucks that have alcohol in them because that's against their religion. And so it's just, I actually really do support religious accommodation. I think it's a very, very important thing. And I think the EEOC and at the state agencies, it is important to try to accommodate people's religious preferences to a great degree. But the case is stunning, just in contrast with the cases we've talked about other weeks about the bakeries and other wedding industry suppliers who are sold, you can't say, I won't bake a wedding cake for a same-sex wedding, even though it would violate your religious beliefs. We're kind of going out of our way in the government level to support Islamic arguments about transporting alcohol, but Christians who don't want to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex wedding are not accommodated by our system. That's way off.
Yeah, sounds like a commentary coming up, so I'm sure we'll hear that. Debbie, if people want to listen to you this Sunday, how can they do so?
The show is called Ladies Can We Talk. It's on 660 a.m. in North Texas from 6 to 8 p.m. on Sunday, but it's also available online. If you just go to ladiescanwetalk.org, you can click on the button and listen to it live online, and you can even comment online. And we're also on Twitter at Debbie Can We Talk, and people tweet during the show. It's kind of fun. Feel free to do that.
Yeah, and Dr. Merrill Matthews, people can go to ipi.org.
Very easy.
And, or, of course, just go to Forbes.com. You can find a lot of Dr. Merrill Matthews commentaries there. We talked about one of those, the viable, affordable alternative to Obamacare. So thank you for writing that. And I quoted it. You're going to hear it next week as we quote once again from Dr. Merrill Matthews. Great to have you around the table.
Good to be here.
Yeah, and great to have you both.
Thanks for having me.
Let's encourage you to visit the website, pointofview.net. Next week is our Truth 360. We're going to have some great guests, and I want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Chris for their help behind the scenes. Have a great weekend. See you back on Monday.
Modern life is go, 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 and Point of View is absolutely ready to go with you. I dare say that most of us have access to either a smartphone or a tablet, maybe even a computer that is app-based. There's a new way to keep up with Kerby and the team, the free Point of View radio app. With quick links to listen to the program live, to keep up and share Kerby's meaty and insightful viewpoints, commentaries, read articles on issues we're talking about that impact you and your family. Did you know you can also watch the show? Yes, radio with cameras. You can access that through the app as well. There's a link to our action alerts, how to find us on the radio across the nation, ways to contact us, and so much more. Visit your app store, iTunes or Google Play. Search for the Point of View radio app. There's no reason not to take us with you. The free Point of View radio app, available now for Apple and Android devices. And when you get it loaded, there's one more button I'd like you to press, the one that says Donate Now. Join Truth Team 360. Support us financially as we support you with the truth that you need. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.